When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Jewelry isn't a gift you give just once. It's a way to remind your loved one of a beautiful moment every time they see it. Blue Nile can help you find the gift that says how you feel and says it beautifully, with expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com and experience the convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com to find the perfect jewelry gift for any occasion. BlueNile.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Two-Footed Podcast here on EPL Index. Now, before we kick things off today, I just want to share something with everybody. This episode is brought to you by our partners at Sky Bet. We've teamed up with Sky Bet because they truly understand what it means to be a fan. Sky Bet appreciates the length that people go through to support their team in all areas, whether you're a match-going fan or otherwise, and there's just no better fit for us right now than a partnership with the good folks at Sky Bet. So with that said, let's go. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Friday. It is the 24th of May. Hope you're all well. And looking forward to a weekend where we get some big football matches and you get to relax and do whatever it is you do over a weekend. We're going to begin today with Lucas Paqueta. It said yesterday that he had been charged with violations of the FA rules around betting. And it turns out it's actually a lot more serious than I even thought yesterday. So he's been charged with misconduct for alleged breaches of rules E5 and F3 relating to yellow cards that he collected against Leicester City in November 2022, Aston Villa in March of 2023, Leeds in May of 2023, and Bournemouth in August of 2023. And it is alleged that he intentionally sought to receive those cards to influence the betting market for personal profit. Additionally, he was charged with 2 breaches of FA Rule F3 for failing to comply with FA Rule F2. He has denied the charges and said that he's extremely upset and surprised. Now, why this is so serious. So you may or may not know that Lucas Paqueta's name is not actually Lucas Paqueta. His name is Lucas Tolentino Cuellar de Lima. He is known as Lucas Paqueta because he's from an area known as Paqueta Island, which is an island in the Guanabara Bay in Rio de Janeiro. Much of his family still lives on said island, and much of the gambling activity around Lucas Paqueta's yellow cards emanates from there. So the belief is that he sought to get these yellow cards on purpose to benefit family members who had bet on him to get these yellow cards. And why this begins to look really bad for him is that in 2022, Stratford Town defender Keenan Isaac was banned for 10 years for his part in what's called spot fixing during an FA Cup tie in which he allegedly got deliberately booked as part of a betting scheme with friends. 10 years for doing it once, and Paqueta is accused of doing it on 4 different occasions. this could be career ending for Lucas Paqueta. Now, my initial thought when it happened was probably 2 years at a max, but somewhere between a year and 2 years. I think I said yesterday 2 years, and it might be reduced to 1 on appeal. Well, Keenan Isaac was banned for 10 years for 1 offence. Now, other people have pointed that in other sports, there's been people that have spot fixed things and they've been sent to prison. It doesn't look like there's any potential of that for Paqueta, but a ban, a very long ban, is almost certain to fall upon him. And as everybody knows, there had been a lot of rumours around him going to Manchester City this summer. He's an 85 million release clause that kicks in the summer. And that move falls apart, obviously. That hammers West Ham in multiple ways because, number one, they don't get the money. And number two, they no longer have the player if he's banned. If he's banned for 10 years, it is career over. He'd be 36 when that ban lifts. Now, he does categorically deny it. West Ham are standing by him. But we'll see what happens when this investigation goes deeper and more stuff becomes public. In the A-League in Australia, 3 players for MacArthur FC have been charged with similar types of offences. And they have been arrested and charged by the police. It's alleged that one of them paid 2 of his teammates, one of them who's the captain, by the way, paid 2 of his teammates $10,000 each to deliberately receive yellow cards in at least 2 A-League matches. And they are facing prison and lifetime bans. You have to imagine Lucas Paqueta is in major trouble here. Major, major trouble. Given that much of the betting activity is traced to Paqueta Island, it surely cannot be a coincidence. And I was able to find 3 of the yellow cards that he received and look at the clips. Now, one of them just looked like a normal yellow card. 2 of them, I could see why. There's a game against Villa, which is the second one in question here. 12th of March last year. And he commits 2 fouls in the game that are... There's no real logic as to why he makes the tackles. He comes through the back of John McGinn for the yellow card he gets. There's not a hope in hell he's getting anywhere close to the ball. There's not enough force in it for it to be a red card, but it does very much look like a deliberate attempt to get booked. Likewise, in the Bournemouth game, it's a little bit fishy. Now, I watched the Leicester one. I haven't seen the Leeds one yet, but I watched the Leicester one, and I think it could be either just an accidental thing, that's just a normal run-of-the-mill thing, but the Villa one and the Bournemouth one, to me, did look particularly peculiar. And, you look at the potential knock-on effect here for West Ham, where they've got a new manager just announced in Julian Lopetegui. He will have been sold the job on the basis of a couple of things. We've got a pretty good squad here now. We're going to sell Lucas Paqueta and there'll be money coming in. And, you'll be keeping Mohamed Kudus, you'll be keeping Jared Bowen, and we'll build from there. Now, that's, I think, likely what they told him. But at the same time, they have to have known all along that the likelihood was that he would face a really long ban. Because remember, this all started last summer. He was meant to join City last summer. They were going to pay over the buyout clause, and West Ham looked like they were going to accept. And then that deal got put on hold because this all began. And look, to his credit, even with all of this going on and knowing that there was a possibility that he was going to face a significant ban, or that, at the very least, he was under the microscope on this, Paqueta put together a pretty impressive season. 8 goals, 7 assists in 43 appearances, played a bunch of different positions, just added new levels to his own game in terms of some of the creative passing. But West Ham have to have known this was coming. So there's a few different stories going around that, now they might be forced to sell Kudus. I don't believe that. I don't believe you can turn around to Lopetegui and say, look, we sold you the job on this basis, but now everything's changed. We know how he is. He won't be afraid to just say, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. I'll just head on and go somewhere else. I think they keep Kudus. They've got a wealthy part owner, Kretinsky, the Czech billionaire who owns 27% of the club. I think he's going to probably dip into his own pocket. Like, let's remember last summer, they signed Ward-Prowse, Alvarez, Mavropanos, and Mohamed Kudus. But overall, they made a profit on the summer business because they sold Rice, they sold Skamaka, they sold Vlasic, and then in January they sold Pablo Fornals, and they also got a sizable loan fee for Syed Benrahma, who'll go this summer. There's other players in that squad that could be moved on this summer. I don't think it's a squad that needs enormous surgery, if I'm being honest, but the Paqueta thing, it does set them back. Like, it just does set them back. They would have been expecting to bring in a sizable chunk of money that could have been redistributed into 2 really good players or 3 very good players. And they are going to have to make up the shortfall on that. But like I say, they've been pretty well run the last couple of years, I feel. So it shouldn't be a major hit for them in terms of what they can do this summer. But, it is a major hit regardless, because he's an outstanding player and they're going to get no return on him. And I don't know what the legal ramifications will be if he gets a 10-year ban. I assume they'll sue him. But, where does that end? I don't know how that will work. Let's move on to something far more exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the greatest segment in podcasting history. It's Big Dunc Watch. And Inverness Caledonian Thistle on Saturday, if you missed it. I'm disgusted with myself that I've left it this long in the week, but I kept forgetting to do it. Inverness Caledonian Thistle, having lost the first leg of the Scottish Championship relegation playoffs 2-1 away to Hamilton Academical, and having the second leg at home with a chance to win and stay in the division, Inverness Caledonian Thistle, under the watchful eye, the mentorship, the leadership of Big Dunc, lost 3-2. They were 2-0 down after 12 minutes. They did pull one back. They were 3-1 down at half-time, which was 5-2 on aggregate. They managed to score a late goal in stoppage time to make it 3-2 on the night. 3-2 to Hamilton, of course, not 3-2 to Inverness. 3-2 to Hamilton on the night and 5-3 on aggregate. So for the second season running, the man, the myth, the legend, Big Dunc, has overseen a relegation. Tremendous crack. To end the season, we take a look at the Big Dunc managerial stats. Inverness, 37 games, 13 wins, 12 draws, 12 defeats, 35.14% win record. For the career, 60 games, 15 wins, 18 draws, 27 defeats, 25% win rate. Never let us forget those compelling 6 months he spent with Forest Green. 18 games, 1 win, 3 draws and 14 defeats, a 5.56% win rate. Absolutely masterful stuff from Big Dunc. And I do note that Inverness fans are calling for him to go. They are absolutely livid about the relegation. They're demanding big changes, including Big Dunc to go. I note that there is a Inverness Caledonian Thistle podcast called the YNS Shuffle, which you best believe I will be going to listen to immediately after recording this. And they are demanding that he go. Dunc has said he'd like to stay and he'd like to help lead them out of the League One morass into the Championship again. I think more likely is he oversees yet another relegation because, well, he's Big Dunc and relegations is what he does. And, you know, Scottish League 2 is there ready and waiting for Big Dunc, where he could take on the might of Dunbarton, East Fife, Forfar, Elgin City, Bonnyrigg Rose. I mean, wouldn't it be fantastic to see Big Dunc on that stage, you know, where his talents deserve to be? As it is, they are preparing for life in League One. And in League One, they will take on Alloa, Montrose, Cove Rangers, Kelty Hearts, Queen of the South, Annan Athletic, Stirling Albion, and FC Edinburgh. Now, the name that stands out there at the moment for Inverness is Kelty Hearts. And the reason they stand out is because it was announced today that Inverness are to move their training ground from the Highlands, where they are from Inverness, all the way down to the new Central Park Stadium in Kelty, which I believe is about 150 miles from Inverness. Inverness to Kelty. It is 135 miles. 135.8. It's 136 miles. Via the A9. That's a 2-hour, 34-minute drive. So the players are going to have to uproot, those that are staying. The coaches will have to uproot. Big Dunc will likely be very happy because it's down closer to Edinburgh and Glasgow. So, you know, if he wants to have himself a little night out, he'll be able to do so. I believe Big Dunc himself is from Stirling, which is very close to Kelty. Kelty to Stirling. Kelty to Stirling. To be fair, it's about a 45-minute drive, but if he wants to nip over for dinner at his mum's house, he'll be able to do that. Madness. Now, the reason they're giving is that it will allow them to attract a higher caliber of players. Now, they've given other reasons. So they've said that extremely limited housing stock and high accommodation have been reasons why they've struggled in recruitment in recent years. I think the fact you're located in Iceland was probably part of it, but that's where you're from. And the idea of moving their training ground all the way down is just, it's quite shameful, to be honest. Now, talks allegedly began before the relegation. But the funny part is that them and Kelty are going to be in the same division next season, sharing a training ground, sharing facilities. They cited the geographical challenges with convincing players. The other reason here is, right, and they won't say this, but this is part of it. They're going to play in League One now. I would imagine the average wage for a League One player in Scotland is probably £500 to £700 a week, maybe less. So some players who are coming in are going to be earning a lot lower than that. So they're going to have to take on potentially another job to supplement their income. And it's maybe easier down in Kelty, where you've got Edinburgh and Dundee and other places close by where there might be more employment opportunities than there would be up in Inverness. So I think that's a big part of it as well. Number of former Inverness players, including Daniel McKay, has come out and said that the club is losing its roots, that the move is ludicrous and appalling, and he's absolutely right. Ruining the club that was built on community, now no pathway or inspiration for youngsters in Inverness to play for their local team. And again, this is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I think this is a shameful move. Genuinely. I think it's a shameful move. And it's a shame to see Inverness struggling the way they are, but you know, it is what it is. And when you appoint Big Dunc, you get bad things. And to be fair, you probably deserve them when you appoint him. Speaking of Scottish football, though, and Highland team, Ross County, the other kind of well-known team located in the Highlands from Dingwall, they take on Raith Rovers in the second leg of the Scottish Premiership relegation playoff. On Sunday, Ross County finished second from bottom in the Premiership this year. Livingston were relegated. Ross County went into this playoff, and they're playing Raith Rovers. They beat them 2-1 last night. Jan Danda, former Liverpool and Swansea City player, opened the scoring. Jack Baldwin made it 2-0. And then Sam Stanton pulled one back to give Raith a bit of hope. It'll be tough for Raith, championship team. You know, had a good season in the Scottish Championship, but it's a big ask to go away to a Premiership team with a deficit and try and overcome that on their ground. Raith finished second in the playoffs, but then managed to work their way through here. So, look, you would expect Ross County to win, but we here at the Two-Footed Podcast and EPL Index are firmly planting our flag in support of Raith Rovers and their charge to the top flight. So fingers crossed for Sunday. Fingers crossed for Sunday. Also on Sunday, we have the EFL Championship playoff final. We'll come to that after the break. Before that, on Saturday, is the FA Cup final, which pits the two Manchester clubs against each other in a repeat of last year's final. Now, there's a report today from Jacob Steinberg, who you'd take with a pinch of salt, an exclusive, that Manchester United have decided to sack Ten Hag after this game, regardless of the outcome. Now, for those that have already forgotten, because it's largely forgettable, City's path to the final: Huddersfield at home beat them 5-0, Spurs away beat them 1-0, Luton away beat them 6-2, Newcastle home beat them 2-0, and then Chelsea at Wembley beat them 1-0, but got a little fortunate when Chelsea were denied a pretty clear penalty. United's path: they went away to Wigan and won 2-0. They went away to Newport County and won 4-2. They went away to Nottingham Forest and won 1-0. And then they beat Liverpool 4-3 after extra time before facing Coventry at Wembley, going 3-0 up, drawing 3-3, and then winning a penalty shootout. Last season, these sides obviously, like I say, met in the final. Ilkay Gundogan scored in the first minute. Bruno Fernandes equalised on 33 from the penalty spot before Gundogan's winner on 51 wrapped that one up. It was a fairly dull game. The year before, it was a dull game, a 0-0 that ended on penalties, Liverpool overcoming Chelsea. The year before that, it was a fairly dull game. Leicester beating Chelsea 1-0 with Yuri Tielemans scoring the only goal of the game. The year before that, the COVID FA Cup final with 0 fans in attendance. Arsenal beat Chelsea 2-1. That was a pretty decent game, to be fair. Pulisic had opened the scoring. Aubameyang equalised in the penalty spot. And then he scored the winner in the second half before he fell out with Mikel Arteta, obviously. And the year before that, Manchester City absolutely trucked Watford, beating them 6-0 en route to a domestic treble. You would hope for a good game at the weekend, but I'm afraid it doesn't promise a good game. It doesn't promise a good game. United are a very poor football team. So I don't expect much. I expect City to win quite comfortably, if I'm being completely honest. I just don't expect much from this Manchester United team because they don't give you any reason to expect much from them. And I'm sure United fans, are hopeful, and you get yourself believing that you can overcome the odds, but it seems unlikely to me. Also tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK kickoff. Actually, what time is the FA Cup final? 3 p.m. 3 p.m. kickoff, back to the traditional slot. It had been 5:30 for a number of years, which I never liked, but back to the 3 p.m. But we have the Women's Champions League final at the San Mamés Stadium in Bilbao, which is an absolute triumph. Barcelona against Lyon. To get to this point, Barcelona topped their group, which had Benfica, Eintracht Frankfurt, and Rosengard of Sweden. They finished with 16 points, 5 wins, and a draw. Lyon topped their group. They had Brann, Slavia Prague, and St. Pölten of Austria. They also topped the group with 14 points, 4 wins, 2 draws. In the quarterfinals, Lyon overcame Benfica, beating them 6-2 in aggregate, 2-1 in the first leg, 4-1 in the second leg. Barcelona overcame Brann, 5-2 in aggregate, 2-1 in the first leg, 3-1 in the second leg. Then in the semi-finals, Barcelona beat Chelsea. They lost the first leg 1-0, but then won the second leg 2-1. Lyon overcame their huge rivals Paris Saint-Germain, 5-3 in aggregate. 3-2 win in the first leg, 2-1 win in the second leg, and that sets up this game, which should be an absolute titanic clash. We're talking about 2 incredibly dominant women's teams here. Barcelona, of course, Champions League winners in 2021 and 2022. And 2023. They were runners-up in 2022. Also runners-up in 2019. They have been very dominant in their domestic league. They've won 5 Liga Femenino titles in a row, to give them 9 in total. They've won 10 Copa del Reinas. Again, they have been quite dominant in recent years, winning 4 of the last 5. And they will be fully expecting to go and win this game. Some very notable names in that squad. Mappy Leon, tremendous player. Yana Fernandez, Claudio Pina, Alexia Putellas, Lucy Bronze, of course, England right back, Kira Walsh, England midfielder. Very, very good players. And I'm sure I'm missing some. Lyon, on the other hand, though, they've been immensely dominant. They have won 17 French titles. They've won it every year dating back, I think, to 06. That's 17 in a row. 1, 2. That looks like 17 in a row to me. Yeah, that's incredible. Absolutely incredible. No, sorry, it's not. It's 17 and 18 years. It's 17 and 18 years. PSG have won it once. PSG won it in 2021. Yeah, Lyon have won it every other year. They've won 10 French Cups. They've won 8 European Cups. 2011, 2012, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2022 when they defeated Barcelona. They've defeated Barcelona both times Barca have lost finals, which is pretty impressive that those two teams have been as dominant. Barcelona beat Wolfsburg last year to win it and beat Chelsea in 2021. They have not beaten Lyon in a final, so they'll be hoping that the third time is a charm. Again, there's just some really well-known players. Aga Hegerberg, who won the Ballon d'Or a few years ago. Lindsay Horan, the American international. Vanessa Giles, Canadian international. Sarah de Britz, who's a German international. Eugenie Le Sommer, well-known players, really good players. Danielle Van de Donk, formerly of Arsenal, Dutch international. Really, really good midfielder. She's been at Lyon now a few years. So I'd imagine Lyon are favourites. I should have mentioned Wendy Renard, shouldn't I? Club captain, French legend. I'd imagine Lyon are favourites going into this one, but should be a hell of a game. Should be a hell of a game. And hopefully, packed house in Bilbao, should be a great atmosphere. I think it's fantastic to see the growth of the women's game in recent years. And huge congratulations to Rebecca Welch, who in December became the first woman to referee a Premier League match and did really, really well, and has since been inducted into the English Football Hall of Fame and is now set to referee a Champions League final. She's also going to officiate at the Olympics. And congrats to her. She's done incredibly well, and she's gotten where she's gotten on merit. So I think I'll go to break, come back. We'll have a look at the Championship playoff final and have a look at how things are already in motion for next season in the English Football League. So see you after this. Right, welcome back. So this Sunday, we have one of the richest games, not the richest game in world football, as the Sky Bet Championship playoff final takes place. And obviously, today's show is brought to you by Sky Bet. We thank them for that. Thought I'd throw in a bit of nostalgia this week because I missed doing it. I was meant to do UEFA Cup yesterday and just my head wasn't in the right space. So today, I thought we'd take a little adventure back through the Championship playoff finals. And we'll begin in an era before Sky Bet. In the 04-05 season, the first year where it was known as the Championship, not Division 1, but the Championship. And back then it was sponsored by somebody else that we won't mention because they're not helping us put this podcast together. In that first playoff final, we had West Ham United beating Preston North End by 1-0 at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. Bobby Zamora with the only goal of the game. In 05, actually, let's just have a look at some of the players in that West Ham team. So Thomas Repka at right back, Anton Ferdinand, obviously younger brother of Rio, Hayden Mullins, Nigel Rio Coker, who's always a favourite of mine, Chris Powell, really good left back from back in the day, currently the assistant manager at Sheffield Wednesday, Matthew Edrington, Marlon Harewood, and Bobby Zamora. Marlon Harewood and Bobby Zamora, like you're just pumping it along to the two of them. Christian Daly, a very young Mark Noble, Carl Fletcher, and a very old Teddy Sheringham. all on the bench, managed by Alan Pardew. The following year then, which is 05-06, Watford defeat Leeds United 3-0, also at the Millennium Stadium. Goals by Jay Demerit, Neil Sullivan with an own goal, who's the Leeds goalkeeper at the time, and Darius Henderson with a late penalty to wrap things up. Ben Foster in goal for Watford that day. You've also got a very young Ashley Young playing left wing, Marlon King playing up front alongside Henderson. In that Leeds team, now Leeds obviously had only recently come down. This was when they were still fighting to get back up before the wheels really came off. Well, the wheels had come off, but before the whole thing went on fire at Leeds. You've got Neil Sullivan, you've got Gary Kelly, Matthew Kilgallen at left back, Jonathan Douglas in midfield, Lee Miller, and Rob Hulse up front. Robbie Blake on the bench, along with David Healy and Steve Stone, who is one of the assistant managers now at Everton. In 06-07, and we're still not mentioning the sponsor because, again, they're not helping us. 06-07, it's Derby County beating West Brom in the playoff final. And the only goal of the game scored by Stephen Pearson. Darren Moore in that Derby team, obviously been a manager in recent years, had some success. Seth Johnson, whose career at that point had kind of hit the skids. He'd moved to Leeds years earlier for big money. They realised he wasn't very good and he'd gone back. He was good. To be fair, that's not fair. He wasn't good enough for Leeds at that point, but he was a good young player. He'd gone back to Derby. Stephen Bywater, who'd been a very promising young goalkeeper when he first broke through at Rochdale and then West Ham, but never quite reached the level that he was expected to reach. You've got Paul Pesky-Scalito, who's, I suppose, now most remembered for the fact that he is married to one of the owners of West Ham United, Karen Brady. I don't know if I think she's got a minority share, but she is the vice chairman of West Ham, formerly managing director of Birmingham. In the West Brom team, you've got Paul McShane, you've got Chris Perry, who a lot of people would remember from when he was at Wimbledon and then Spurs. Paul Robinson, solid left back. Jason Kumas, very good player. Jonathan Greening, very good player. Zoltan Gira was a really, really good kind of wide attacking midfielder who played for West Brom, and I think was he at Hull for a while, or have I made that up in my head? He's at Fulham. Sorry, Fulham. He had 2 spells at West Brom, either side of a spell at Fulham. Diamansi Camara and Kevin Phillips also in that team, but it wasn't their day, and they were beaten 1-0 by Derby, who came up and proceeded to put together the worst season in Premier League history. In 07-08, then, that season ended with Hull beating Bristol City 1-0 in the playoff final. Dean Windass with the only goal of the game. This one played at Wembley. Boaz Myhill, Michael Turner, Nick Barmby, Fraser Campbell, Windass himself. Notable players in that team. Not so much. Dele Adebola was in that Bristol team. Bradley Orr was in that Bristol team. Lee Johnson, who's most recently been manager of Fleetwood, was on the bench that day. We move on to 2008-2009, which ended with Burnley beating Sheffield United 1-0 in the playoff final under Owen Coyle at the time. This is obviously the pre-Dyche era. Joey Gudjonsson was on the bench, but it's not Graham Alexander, who played quite a bit of fullback as well, played in midfield that day. Michael Duff, who's recently been named manager of Huddersfield. Clark Carlisle, Stephen Caldwell. Some pretty good players in that team. In the Sheffield United team, you've got Paddy Kenny. You've got a very young Kyle Walker at right back. Kyle Naughton on the other side. Matthew Kilcallan, who got into the playoff final with Leeds, gets to another one with Sheffield United, unsuccessful again. Greg Halford played left side of midfield, and Craig Beattie played up front. Lee Hendry and Arturo Lipoli, players who everybody will know. Lee Hendry played for England once, but Lipoli you might not remember. He was at Arsenal as a youngster. They'd taken him from the Parma Academy, and he was expected to be a really big prospect, but didn't make the grade there. And, you know, he had a long career, but very much a journeyman, and never quite found where he fit in the professional game, unfortunately for him. We move on to the 09-10 season, and that ended with Blackpool beating Cardiff City in the playoff final at Wembley, 3-2 on the day. Charlie Adam, Gary Taylor-Fletcher, and Brett Ormeroyd with the goals. Michael Chopra had put Cardiff 1 up, and then Joe Ledley put them 2-1 up, but it was Blackpool's day. Adam, DJ Campbell, Ormeroyd, and Gary Taylor-Fletcher are probably the best known players from that team. Seamus Coleman was at Blackpool on loan that year, and managed to help get them promoted. That was before he went back to Everton to become a mainstay. He only played in, I think, 12 games in total. He probably thought that was a really good start to his professional career, but it would be the only time he would get to celebrate winning anything in his entire career, which is a bit of a shame. Jason Newell was on the bench, as well as Stephen Dobby, but Jason Newell was a player I always liked. Came through at Wimbledon, was at Charlton, Middlesbrough, Southampton. Always a fan of Jason Newell. Good goal-scoring midfielder back in his early days. 3 caps for Jamaica. Good player. In that Cardiff team, you've got Mark Kennedy, former Irish international, played for Wimbledon, played for Liverpool, played for a few others. Joe Ledley, who obviously went on and had a good career. Jay Boothroyd had to go off early, and that kind of hurt Cardiff's plan. Michael Chopra. Peter Enkelman, best known for allowing a throw-in to brush the underside of his foot and end up in his own net, and B, have an award called the Peter Enkelman What the Fuck Award, named after him on the Villa podcast. Anthony Gerrard on the bench there as well. David Marshall in goal had a long and pretty good career. We move on to 2010-11, I should say. Again, there's a new sponsor, but it's not our boys at Sky Bet, so we won't be mentioning them. And in the playoff final in 2011, Swansea City beat Reading 4-2. Brendan Rodgers, the manager of Swansea at the time. Ashley Williams, Leon Britton, Joe Allen, Scott Sinclair, and Fabio Barini all starting for them. Luke Moore, whose brother Stephen Moore, like him, played for Villa, came through their academy. Craig Beattie on the bench for them. In that Reading team, you've got Ian Hart, former Irish international. You've got Joby McAnuff, talented player. He was also at Wimbledon and then went to West Ham. He came through the Wimbledon Academy, never quite hit the heights that were expected. You've got a young Alex McCarthy who's currently still playing for Southampton and will be involved in this weekend's playoff final. So 13 years after he lost this one, he has a chance to rectify that. Hal Robson-Kanu made himself a Welsh legend, didn't he, a few years back. We'll go to 2011-12. Again, playoff final is 2012. It is West Ham United against Blackpool. Carlton Cole puts West Ham 1 up. Tom Ince equalise. And Ricardo Vastey with the winner. Sam Allardyce, the West Ham manager. Winston Reid and James Tompkins at centre-back. Rob Green in goal. Mark Noble and Kevin Nolan in midfield. Gary O'Neill, now the manager of Wolves, playing in midfield as well. Julian Faber, Stephen Henderson and George McCartney, notable players on the bench. In that Blackpool team, Kevin Phillips, Tom Ince, Barry Ferguson, Scottish legend, Rangers legend, Stephen Craney at left back, Neil Erdley at right back, Craig Cathcart on the bench. Yeah, some fairly well-known faces there. 2012-13 playoff final. Crystal Palace 1, Watford 0. Kevin Phillips, who'd had some playoff heartbreak, some playoff joy over his career, he scores the only goal of the game. A penalty in stoppage time at the end of first half of extra time. That Palace team, Joel Ward is there. Danny Gabidon is there. Mili Jedinak is there. Wilf Zaha is in that team. On the bench, you've got Yannick Bolasie and Phillips, who would come on and score the game. Scored the winning goal of the game. Manuel Almunia, former Arsenal goalkeeper, was in nets for Watford. Nathaniel Chalobah played holding midfield. Matija Vidra was playing on the right of the attack. Troy Deeney playing as the 9. Troy Deeney, obviously one of the most deluded human beings to ever grace the green earth. A terrible set of lads is Troy. Moving on, 2013-14, now known as the Sky Bet Championship. In the first playoff of this era, Queen's Park Rangers beat Derby County by 1-0. Bobby Zamora with a last-minute winner, the only goal of the game. In that Derby team, Andre Wisdom, Richard Keogh, Jeff Hendrick, the Cuz, Will Hughes, Zach Whitebread on the bench, Connor Salmon on the bench, Patrick Bamford on the bench. For QPR, you've got Rob Green in goal. You've got Nada Manua, Richard Dunn, Nico Crankier. This team obviously managed, because Nico Crankier is there, obviously managed by Harry Redknapp. Joey Barton in midfield with Gary O'Neill. O'Neill was sent off on the hour mark. Junior Hoylett, who had so much talent, but it just never really clicked for him, playing left wing. Charlie Austin and Kevin Doyle up front. That was actually a really good front pairing. And then on the bench, you've got Armand Traore, Ravel Morrison, Carl Henry, and Zamora, who had come on to replace Doyle. Moving on, the 2014-15 season of the Sky Bet Championship. And the playoff final that year was Norwich 2, Middlesbrough 0. Cameron Jerome and Nathan Redmond with the goals. John Ruddy, Russell Martin, who will be leading his Southampton side into this game, played centre-back for Norwich that day. Alex Tete, Johnny Howson, Nathan Redmond, Wes Houlihan, Bradley Johnson, Cameron Drums, pretty strong team. Gary O'Neill, fella loves himself a playoff final. And here he is back again for yet another playoff final. And yet another playoff final victory for Gary O'Neill. I came off the bench in the 87th minute just to help see the game out. The Middlesbrough team, Daniel Ayala, Ben Gibson, playing centre-back, currently free agent. If anyone's looking for a left-footed centre-back, Patrick Bamford was up front. Jonathan Woodgate, or the ghost of Jonathan Woodgate, was on the bench. Moving on to 2015-16, the 2016 playoff final was won by Hull City. They beat Sheffield Wednesday 1-0. Mo Diame with the only goal of the game. Some notable players in that Hull team, Michael Dawson, Curtis Davis, Andy Robertson, Jake Livermore, Tom Huddleston, Diame, Robert Snodgrass, Abel Hernandez. Coming off the bench in the 89th minute, the third sub off the bench, Harry Maguire. Who would have thought that Harry Maguire, the third sub off the bench in the 2016 playoff final, championship playoff final, aged 23, would be starting for England in the World Cup 2 years later, and then moving to Manchester United for £80 million 3 years later. Having suffered relegation with Hull, moved to Leicester in the interim. Absolutely insane how that worked out. In that Sheffield Wednesday team, Barry Bannon is the name that really stands out. Always like Barry Bannon, lovely left-footed player. 2016-17 in the Sky Bet Championship, we had a playoff final that ended in a 0-0 draw between Huddersfield and Reading, and Huddersfield would win 4-3 on penalties. That Reading team had Chris Gunter, Thiago Allure, John Swift, currently at West Brom. Lewis Graben was in that team. The Huddersfield team had Danny Ward, who I believe was on loan from Liverpool. Aaron Moy, who had a good career. Still surprised that he retired so early. Izzy Brown was in that team. Rajiv van der Para, who's the brother of Ginny Wijnaldum. Naki Wells was in that team. Casey Palmer was on the bench. He's just had a really good season for Coventry. But, kind of evidence he's been knocking around for a while. 2017-18 ended with the 2018 playoff final of the Sky Bet Championship, with Fulham beating Aston Villa 1-0. Tom Kearney with the only goal of the game. You've got Dennis Adoy, Tim Ream, Matt Targett, Ryan Sessegnon, who's just been, I believe, released by Tottenham. Mitrovic was up front for that team. In the Villa team, you had Sam Johnston in goal, obviously currently at Crystal Palace. John Terry at centre-back. Everybody celebrated when Villa lost because they'd had him. Alan Hutton played left-back. Jedinak was in that team. Jack Grealish and Conor Hourihane were in that team. Snodgrass and Graben were in that team. James Bree, who is currently at Southampton and may well feature this weekend if he's fit. I don't know if he is. Glenn Whelan. Who else? Josh Onuma was a pretty good player. And Scott Hogan, all on the bench there for Villa. 2018-19 in the Sky Bet Championship ended with Villa beating Derby County 2-1 to finally return to the top flight. You had Axel Tuanzebe and Tyron Mings at centre-back. John McGinn, Conor Hourihane and Jack Grealish in midfield. Tammy Abraham up front. Anwar El-Ghazi on the wing. Courtney House coming off the bench. Henry Lansborough on the bench. Didn't come on. Neither did Mila Yendak. There's a player there as well, Andre Green. And I remember when he broke through at Villa and was very, very highly thought of. He ended up having a couple of loans and he sort of just bounced around. He spent 2 years playing with Slovan Bratislava. I'd lost track of I had wondered where he'd gone. Every so often you just remember a random player. And I looked him up and he was at Slovan Bratislava of all places. But he's now back with Rotherham. He did tear his Achilles tendon in October, so he's going to be out for a while. I hope he's got another year in his contract there, so he's not kind of been released without a safety net while he's recovering from that horrendous injury. In that Derby County team, you've got Fikayo Tomori, you've got Ashley Cole, you've got Mason Mount, Harry Wilson, Mason Bennett, another player that was very, very highly thought of when he first came through. And again, his career didn't pan out the way it was expected to. He had a decent enough spell at Millwall, but he's a forward player who's never managed to figure out how to score goals. He's currently at Burton Albion. On the bench for them, you've got Scott Carson, who's currently on the bench for Man City, and Jason Knight, managed by Frank Lampard, no less. And wasn't it wonderful to see Frank fail? Because sometimes you just enjoy watching people not get where they want to get. The 2019-2020 Sky Bet Championship season ended with Fulham beating Brentford 2-1 in the playoff final. Did I say who scored in the last two finals? I don't know. Joe Bryan scored both goals for Brentford in that playoff final. And Henrik Dalsgaard pulled one back for Brentford quite late, but they lost 2-1. David Raya had a stinker on the day, an absolute stinker. David Raya in goal, Pontus Jansson, Ethan Pinnock, Rico Henry, Matthias Jensen, Christian Norgard, Josh Da Silva, Brian Mbomo, Ollie Watkins, and Saeed Benrahma. That's a hell of a championship team. You've got Sergi Canos, Emi Marcondes on the bench for Fulham. Let's see, Dennis Adoy, Tim Ream, Joe Bryan, Harrison Reed, Tom Kearney, Niskin Skabano, Josh Onama, Bobby D. Cordova-Reid, Abubakar Kamara on the bench. You've got Maxime Le Marchand, you've got Mitrovic, you've got Knockhart, you've got Cavaliero. Two pretty strong teams. Obviously, Scotty Two Coats, the manager of Fulham. The 2021 Sky Bet Championship season ended with Brentford finally getting promoted, beating Swansea City. Now, there's some change in that team, but they still managed to keep hold to quite a few. You've got Ray, you've got Janssen, you've got Pinnock. Rico Henry missed that final through injury. Roerslev played, Jensen played, Janelt played, Sergi Canos played left wing back instead of Henry. Ivan Toney's there and Brian Mbomo's there on the bench. You've got Winston Reid. You've got Norgard, who wasn't fully fit. Saman Ghoddos on the bench there. That Swansea team was managed by Steve Cooper, and in it you've got some really good players. You've got Freddie Woodman in goal. You've got Mark Guehi at centre-back. You've got Connor Roberts playing in midfield, Connor Hurhan in midfield. You've got Ayew and Jamal Lowe up top. Jan Danda, who I mentioned earlier in part one, came off the bench for Swansea in that one. And Morgan Whittaker, who has just had an absolutely outrageous season for Plymouth, he was in that team as well because he'd come through the Derby Academy. When they had their financial problems, Swansea snapped him up. He never quite found his groove at Swansea. Had a loan at Lincoln, did pretty well. Had a loan at Plymouth, played a big part in helping them get promoted, and then had an unbelievable season. 19 goals in 40 games in the Championship as a winger this past year. 23 years of age, a 6'2" winger. I think he'll be getting some big attention this summer. Wouldn't be surprised if there's a Premier League club, maybe one of the newly promoted clubs, that snaps him up. The 21-22 Sky Bet Championship season ended with Nottingham Forest beating Huddersfield 1-0 on the day. A Levi Colwill own goal. That Huddersfield team had obviously Colwill, Lewis O'Brien and Harry Tofola, who'd end up at Forest. Sorba Thomas, who's a very fun player to watch. And Jordan Rhodes, who one of those players that's kind of a constant goal threat in the lower leagues, but never quite good enough at the highest level. In the Forest team, you had Bryce Samba, you had Joe Worrell, Steve Cook, Scott McKenna, Jed Spence, Ryan Yates, James Garner, now playing very well for Everton, Brennan Johnson. Yeah, pretty good team. The 22-23 season, which is obviously the last season in the Sky Bet Championship, ended with Luton beating Coventry on penalties after a 1-1 draw. Jordan Clark had put them ahead. Gus Hammer had equalised. We go to penalties. All 5 players score for both teams. And then, unfortunately, up steps Dabo, and he absolutely skies it. And he ended up getting released after the game. He went, or not after the game, but at the end of the season, he went to Forest Green Rovers and then they got relegated. So imagine that for a time in your career where you are on the brink of the Premier League. You've come through the Chelsea Academy, you've been well schooled, you've had loans at Swindon and Vitus Arnhem and Sparta Rotterdam. You go to Coventry, you play a big part in their rise from League One into the Championship. You have 3 decent seasons. You miss a penalty on the brink of the Premier League. And the only club you can find to go to at that point is a League Two side. Now, they probably offer decent enough wages, but you go there, you get managed by a clown in Troy Deeney, who absolutely rips into you publicly, and you get relegated into the non-league and get released again. That's a tough 12 months. That's a tough 12 months for anybody. I hope someone picks him up. Yeah, and that brings us to this season, the 23-24 Sky Bet Championship season, which will end officially on Sunday, with Leeds taking on Southampton in what should be a great game. It's a 3 p.m. kickoff. Make sure you watch it. Moving on, the Sky Bet Championship teams are already starting to plan for next season, obviously. Plymouth, Hull, Sunderland and Norwich are all currently without managers. Plymouth moved on from Neil Jewson. Well, didn't move him on. He stepped down to be... He was the director of football, stepped into the manager's job. He's now gone back to being director of football. They're looking for a new manager, and it looks like it could be Wayne Rooney, which would just be an appalling appointment. Sunderland are on the lookout. There's been a lot of Will Still type of hype, but doesn't look like it will be him. Maybe it will. We'll see. Hull sacked Liam Rossinier, which I think was a poor decision. Clearly didn't have a succession plan because nobody's been appointed yet. And then Norwich sacked David Wagner after they failed to get promoted, which I think a lot of people had expected and weren't too surprised by. In the Sky Bet League One, Barnsley, Birmingham and Huddersfield all making changes. Barnsley had Martin Devaney as the caretaker manager. He has been replaced by Darrell Clark. Darrell Clark coming into the club from Cheltenham. He's previously managed Salisbury City, Bristol Rovers for 4 years, Walsall for 2 years, Port Vale for 2 years, and then Cheltenham in this past season. 39 games at Cheltenham, taking over in September. He's pretty highly regarded in the lower leagues, so we'll see how he does. That's, it's a pretty big job he's taking on there at Barnsley. Birmingham expected that Tony Mowbray would be their manager again after they sacked Rooney, brought Mowbray, and they need to step down because of his health, and Gary Rowett came in. They obviously got relegated. And then Tony Mowbray made the decision that he just wasn't going to be able to oversee next season. So he has resigned, and he says his health just won't allow him to resume his duties soon enough for the needs of the club. But that once he's back, he wants to prioritize some quality time with his family before going back into football. I think obviously when you get ill, the way he has, you really do kind of probably see a bit more of what's important in life. And I think that's what's happened there. So Birmingham on the look for manager. Would it be a surprise if Gary Rowett got it permanently? He's had 2 spells there now, stepped into the breach this season. It didn't go great, but by the time he got in, there was very little he could do. 1-3 and drew 3. 1-3 and drew 2 of his 8 games in charge. Maybe they go to him. Maybe they do. Huddersfield have appointed Michael Duff, as I mentioned earlier. Duff had previously been in charge at Swansea. That did not go well. He was, prior to that, in charge of Barnsley. That went decently enough, to be fair to him. He had a pretty good season there. Wasn't enough for him. I think the Swansea job was a kind of bigger draw for him, but it was a disaster. He lasted only 21 games, 6 wins, 6 draws, 9 defeats. He cut his teeth at Cheltenham, spent 4 pretty productive years there. I helped them win League Two. I think it's a decent appointment for Huddersfield for League One. So I think that's not bad at all. In League Two, then, Swindon Town had Gavin Gunning as the interim manager at the end of the season. They've moved on. They're looking for a new manager. Gillingham had Stephen Clements. They have sacked him. Mark Bonner has been appointed as their new manager. He spent 3 years with Cambridge United. Morecambe, they had Jed Branning. He has gone to Accrington Stanley before the end of last season. So they're on the lookout. And then obviously Cheltenham, in losing Darryl Clark, are now on the lookout for a new manager themselves. So that is 3 teams in that division looking for a new manager. And then in the National League, where you might expect that there'd be a whole ton of upheaval, thus far, not so much. Hartlepool decided not to keep Kevin Phillips. They've appointed Darren Sarl as their new manager. He previously worked at Stevenage, Yeovil and Woking, and he will be charged with trying to get them into the Sky Bet League 2. And then at Wealdstone, best known, of course, for the legend that is the Wealdstone Raider, Sam Cox had been the interim manager. They decided not to stick with him. And they've appointed Matthew Taylor, who everybody remembers his playing career: Luton, Portsmouth, Bolton, West Ham, Burnley, Northampton, Swindon. Scored some absolutely outrageous goals over the year. You've all seen the clips. He's also well known for that Roy Keane clip where he talks about how he tried to sign him at Sunderland, and I think his choices at the time were Sunderland or Bolton. And he went up to meet Sunderland, and while he was still in the car park, having told Roy he was going to take some time to think it over, he texted him and said, having thought about it, I've decided to go to Bolton. So that's who's taken over. He's been caretaker manager at Swindon for a time while he was there as a player. Then he was working with the under-18s at Spurs. He was Walsall manager. He was Shrewsbury Town manager, but having not done a great job at either, particularly Walsall, where he was kind of sacked in February. He was also sacked by Shrewsbury, it should be pointed out. He's dropping down into non-league to give it another go. And best of luck to him. I hope it goes well. But yeah, those are the changes in the National League. And with that, we'll go to break and we'll be back with our news and gossip. So I'll see you after this. Right, folks, welcome back. So, where to start? Breaking news coming out of the PGMOL is that a gentleman whose job it is to sort of oversee the development of referees and kind of decide whether or not they progress has been given a 5-month ban for telling a black assistant ref he'd have to smile to be seen in the dark. This man's name is Roger Gifford, and he should be banned for life. That is absolutely outrageous. And if we wonder why we don't see more black and Asian and whatever other race officials progressing, it's because you've got people like Roger Gifford. Roger spelled with a D and a G as well. Rodger. Like, a way to fuck with your pompousness. That's a surname. Roger first name, Rodger. A way to fuck. Ban the man for life. Absolutely ban that man for life. Barcelona, being the weird gang of lads that they are, have sacked Xavi Hernandez. He won the league title last year. He announced early in the season he was going to leave. They begged him to stay. And now they have decided to sack him because he was open and honest about the club's financial struggles. That is absolutely shameful. Xavi Hernandez is a Barcelona legend. And to be treated like that is absolutely disgusting. Now, the replacement for him is going to be Hansi Flick, who did a great job with Bayern Munich, won the treble in 2020, then took over as manager of the German national team and it did an absolutely awful job. So we'll see. We'll see how this works out. But Quique Sanchez Flores, who's the current manager of Sevilla, he has come out very strongly. Sevilla play Barca this weekend in their final league game of the season. And he has come out and talked about how Barca treats its legends and how poorly they treated Koeman. Now, Koeman was not a good manager, but they did treat him very, very poorly. They treated Messi very poorly at the end as well, with messing him around. And now Xavi and Quique Sanchez Flores, to his credit, has come out very strongly and not minced his words at all. Not minced them at all. Fair play to him. It's a shame more people don't do the same. Newcastle have been absolutely obliterated this morning. They were playing the A-League All-Stars. Now, admittedly, it was a team of very young players, but they got demolished 8-0, which I would say should be worrying for Newcastle that their academy players are of such a low standard. But, you know, it is what it is. Aurelien Tchouameni is set to miss the Champions League final. He's got a foot injury. Shockwave sent through the fan base. Wolves supporters are appalled by a significant hike in the price of their season tickets. I think I read somewhere it's gone up like 19% or something. 17%. 17%. Yeah. One person saying their season ticket has increased from £735 to £730 to £835. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Nick, who's clearly a bootlicker, I actually think it's not too bad. Our ticket prices have hardly gone up over the last 5 years. The cost of living has affected clubs. During lockdown, we also didn't take any money from the government. I mean, how do them boots taste? How do those boots taste, Nick? Nick is definitely voting Tory or Reform in the next election. A dreadful set of lads. Looks like Chelsea have a 3-man shortlist for their job. Kieran McKenna, Enzo Marasca, and Thomas Frank. I don't understand this list. I really don't. I mean, I do. I understand Marasca and McKenna, but I don't understand why they'd even consider that job at this point in their managerial careers. That would be absolutely awful for them because they will get sacked. Like, Bowley will not show them any patience and they will get sacked. And it will be remembered that they walked out on clubs they'd just gotten promoted. So, you know, but then there's nothing makes sense anymore because Vincent Kompany is about to become manager of Bayern Munich, having spent a fortune and gotten Burnley relegated. We'll move to the gossip. Newcastle are hoping to sign Jared Bowen and Dominic Calvert-Lewin this summer. I'd really struggle to believe they can afford to sign both of them. And the only way they sign them is if Isak goes. Newcastle want nearly 200 million for Isak. Jesus. Thomas Tuchel is the leading candidate to take over at Manchester United if they sack Ten Hag, which The Guardian have reported, and then The Guardian are the ones that are saying that they've made the decision to sack him. Kieran McKenna is open to taking over at Manchester United if Ten Hag leaves. Okay. Brighton are confident of beating Chelsea in hiring McKenna, but could try to bring back Graham Potter. I don't think that'd go down well. I actually just don't believe that's true. Maybe they would. I think that would go down really badly. Chelsea are set to ask Leicester City for permission to speak to Enzo Marasca. Nottingham Forest will have to sell players before the end of June to avoid breaching the profit sustainability rules. Bayern Munich are keeping tabs on John Stones. This is Football Insider, and this is them being really lazy and really crap because Company is going there. Company played for Villa, or for City, obviously for City, with Stones, and they're going to try and link a bunch of City players to Bayern now over the next couple of weeks. You watch. Jack Grealish is also a target for Bayern. No, he's not. Don't be so foolish. Manchester City are open to selling Ederson. I don't believe that. Ademola Lookman is attracting interest from Premier League clubs, and he could cost 30 million. I think he might cost a bit more than that, but I wouldn't pay it for him. Julian Lopetegui wants Max Kilman to be one of at least 6 signings as he plots a summer overhaul. It's Jacob Steinberg. Take it with a pinch of salt. Arsenal are interested in Justin Bijlow. Burnley are asking for 17 million in compensation for Vincent Kompany. That's bananas. Craig Bellamy will not join Kompany at Bayern. Interesting. Chelsea will listen to offers for Conor Gallagher and Trevoh Chalobah. Liverpool have turned their attention to Crescencio Somerville. I highly doubt it. Manchester United are leading the race to sign Michael Olise. The source of this is, of course, an exclusive by our good friends at Football Transfers, Jack Talbot. The waft of spoof off that is absolutely incredible. Aston Villa are considering terminating the contract of Phil Coutinho, probably for the best. Callum Hudson-Odoi is set to be a target for Tottenham. No. Just no. Just stop it. Ajax and Feyenoord are interested in Omari Hutchinson. I think that's a ploy from Chelsea to leak that because they want Ipswich to pay up for him. Stokes, Soleimani, Sidibe could be on the move this summer, with Brighton, Chelsea, Monaco, and Juventus all interested in the 17-year-old. So he has been with Stoke since the age of 8. Born in France, somehow, the poor boy, his dad is Mamadi Sidibe. So his dad moved to Stoke in 2005 and spent 8 years on their books, and that's how the poor lad ended up moving from Paris to Stoke at the age of 8. No, that doesn't line up. That doesn't line up at all. He'd left Stoke. He left Stoke in 2013. He didn't join. He obviously just was very fond of Stoke. Maybe he stayed living in Stoke. When he was born, his dad was playing for Stoke, but obviously he must have moved there as a baby then. Maybe they went to France and he was born there. But he's grown up in England. He's been called up for England under 17 and 18. Imagine doing that to a poor child. You could live in France or you could live in Stoke, and we've decided that Stoke is where we want you to be. Now, that kid is very, very talented. Very, very talented. One to definitely keep an eye on. Brazilian winger Willian is considering offers from Saudi Arabia with his Fulham contract set to expire. And that's it, folks. That's all for today. I will see you Monday. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the weekend. Bye-bye.
Podcast Network.